But really what I was hearing was, please, for the love of God, I am so insecure in what I'm doing. Just tell me that I'm doing it right. I'm so convinced that I'm doing it wrong that for 5 seconds, could you please just tell me that I'm doing it right? You
Right.
know, if you're struggling to get into any habit, it's often not the how, right? We spend so much time thinking about how can I get it done, right? How can I get this done? How can I finally like do the laundry that I've been behind on for 6
Mhm.
weeks? And really it's the why. And so really clarifying why things are important to you opens up so much more creativity for how we can get them done, right? Because
Today's guest is Ahuva Hershkop, and we met. You contacted me, Ahuva, and you sent me this absolutely brilliant podcast with Renee. I don't know if you remember from the mom room, and I listened to it the start of June while I was on my way. It was quite a long drive to a retreat, to a retreat that was called the Island of World Peace. So it's actually this retreat from my meditation organization, and it's just one house on an island, and so yeah, I can share a little bit later of all the insights I got by listening to what you had to
yeah,
share. And I'm absolutely excited, to this topic is very close to my heart and to yours as well. I myself was in burnout 2 years ago. And I can now, in hindsight, see that there's a more spiritual aspect to it all. And maybe my body needed it, to
yeah.
get ready and release a bit of fears that needed to be really released. So would you like to introduce yourself, maybe share, because I'm coming from a parenting aspect, if you have children and what you actually do, and maybe how you found that
What do I do? Who am I? Yeah. So I'm Ahuva Hershkop. I am a coach for overstretched professional women. Many of my clients are moms, not all of them are moms. And really the women that I coach are, women who have hustled their entire lives to accomplish their goals, to get things done. And at this point in their lives are kind of realizing that that level of hustle is just not possible with all the goals that they have, right? Whether they're family goals, with their kids, with their job, with wanting to be, just a normal functioning human being as an adult. That level of hustle is just not possible, right? Those 10,000 hours I used to be able to study for an exam so I could make sure that I got an A just really isn't available to me now. And that's really where my clients are finding themselves. And, I coach clients who don't want to compromise on their goals, but want to find a way to achieve them outside of the hustle. I am also a mom of 3 kids, 6 and under. So, when I talk to other busy parents, busy professionals, I'm like, guys, I get it too. I'm right there with you.
Mhm. And you've got a twin set of 6-year-olds, and what age is your other child?
I have a 6.5-year-old twins, and I have a son who's turning 3 in November.
Mhm. So you
So he's
were,
2 and a half, I guess.
and if I heard this right, you were kind of in the midst of it all when 2020 happened, and were you
I
pregnant as
found
well?
out that I was pregnant 2 days after lockdown happened. Yes.
Right.
So my kids were sent home, and then I peed on a stick and was like, well, this is an interesting addition to the situation.
From my observation over, I always think that parents of very young children and toddlers at that time, I think you were hit the worst, because like doing that work and doing this impossible task of running after a toddler at the same time,
Yeah.
it's,
I think that there is an element of like, I thought a lot about this, obviously, because,
yeah,
I'm very lucky to live very close to my entire family. And in my family, we have 14 nieces and nephews under the age of 15 right now. Like between 15 and almost 3. There's 14 kids. So I've sort of seen how different ages fared. And I think that as parents, we were hit the most. And as children, our kids were very luckily, like very much spared, right? Like my kids don't really remember. They were 3.5 when it started. So
yeah,
it was around like between 3.5 and 5.5. They're kind of like, you know, like, oh right, that was a time, right? They
yeah,
were very much spared and we were
yeah.
very much hit quite hard.
Absolutely. And is this when, because I believe you had a different business, more nutrition based, and then you changed throughout.
Yeah.
Could you share a little
So
bit about that?
yeah, I am by training, I'm a dietitian. I started a pediatric nutrition based like practice in the end of 2019. I was like, this is, I have a husband who works very long hours. I was like, I want more flexibility. Decided to start my own business at the end of 2019. I was like, you know what? At the beginning of 2020, we're going to try and, get pregnant with a third child. It's probably going to take me a year to get pregnant just based on my history. And so this will be great. I'll have a year to before I get pregnant to build my practice. I'll have 9 months, until I have a baby. Like I'll get my business in a really good spot. And I found out that I was pregnant a month after we tried, 2 days after COVID lockdown started. And so really how I ended up, getting into this space was consistently hearing that the questions that my clients were asking me weren't really the ones that they meant. Meaning, I would get a lot of questions from moms specifically who I was talking to, asking things like, is it okay if and like, what do you think about? But really what I was hearing was, please, for the love of God, I am so insecure in what I'm doing. Just tell me that I'm doing it right. I'm so convinced that I'm doing it wrong that for 5 seconds, could you please just tell me that I'm doing it right?
Yes.
Right. And moms who also were spending so much time blaming themselves and beating themselves up for not being able to do the quote unquote bare minimum, when the standard they were setting was like above and beyond 17,000 times, right? And at the same time, I was doing the same thing in my business. Why can't I build a business? Everybody else seems to be able to, like, for completely forgetting the other circumstances of being pregnant during a pandemic with 3.5-year-old twins. Why is it mine going faster? I feel like I'm doing this wrong. Please, for the love of God, I wasted money on like coaches just to tell me that I was doing, like just for this explicit like sake of them telling me that I was doing it right and I wasn't completely screwing everything up, right?
Yeah.
And I went back to work 6 days after having my third son because I was like, I can't afford to lose the momentum that I'm building. I was so scared that I was going to lose momentum that I was like, whatever, I will go back, 6 days after having had him.
Yeah.
And very quickly burnt myself out because I ignored so many of the other signs that I was really like spiraling towards: overwork, overwhelm, cut and hustle. And at a certain point, it occurred to me like I wasn't the only one, right? It couldn't just be me, and it couldn't just be my friend down the street, and it couldn't just be everyone else that I knew, and just be all of us.
Yeah.
And so I really took a step back and started understanding how so many women find themselves here, mothers or not, and the very practical ways that women can rewire, their nervous systems, rewire their brains in order to step out of that overwork and overwhelm without sacrificing their goals.
Yeah. And isn't it, I don't even know what word to use, Ahuva, but sometimes it has to really hit us really hard before we even notice that something is wrong, right?
Yeah.
I always have this
100%.
funny story. Like I was working full-time job with 2 children here in 2020, and their dad went out to work as an essential worker, and there was, after 2 months, when you sit there and you look at the work building up and the housework, someone shared, and you can probably have better stats than me, that mothers were challenged with 13 hours more housework a week, if not more. And, there was this funny thing, and we're going to get into this topic of perfectionism a little bit, where I was looking at these dirty windows between March and May in 2020. And
when nobody was outside to see them anyway.
True. And finally, the end of May, I managed to clean these windows, and my then husband stepped in the door and said, "But you do know that there's a storm coming, right?" So
oh my gosh,
the day after I had everything cleaned, it looked all the same. And I think that was one of my biggest lessons of, and maybe this is one of the questions we hadn't even probably prepared or anything, but to look at that high standard of housework we set ourselves, that maybe we got from a different generation, but I really had to look at everything and leave the crumbs on the ground. So what do you, and it really hit me in the middle of my burnout, what do you recommend to moms who are at such a stretch and overwhelm, how to take it more gentle with housework and the things they see around them that they should do,
Yeah. So I think that there's so much to say there. And I think there's so many practices, that I go very deep into, obviously, in my coaching containers with that, because we do like very deep dives. But what I always encourage people to take a step back and ask themselves is, why are these things important to you? Right. I literally just posted about this on social media, I think like right before. So funny. Every time that I get on a podcast episode, I feel like I say the words, I feel like I just posted on social media about this, because, I spend all of my time in this world.
Yes.
But, an example of, and this obviously doesn't have to do with housework, but when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I was like bullied for my weight, and I tried to take up running to try and change my weight. Okay. I hated running. If you asked me at like 14 years old, I thought running was the worst activity ever. I couldn't understand why somebody would do it. I would anything and everything and be like, well, it's Tuesday, so I probably shouldn't try and run today. Well, it's only 18 degrees, or it's only 19 degrees, right? Anything and everything was a reason that I couldn't do that. I shouldn't do it. And, if you're struggling to get into any habit, it's often not the how, right? We spend so much time thinking about, how can I get it done, right? How can I get this done? How can I finally like do the laundry that I've been behind on for 6 weeks? And really it's the why, right? Normally we either haven't connected to the why, or we're using a why we should do something that is totally built on shame, blame, guilt. You're not a good enough mom, or you're clearly messing up, or like, why should you do it? So that people don't come over to your house and like laugh at you and be like, you're a terrible human who can't keep up with it. Like, that's not a good why. That's not a why that often is going to motivate people. That's going to stick you straight back to inaction, into just feeling even more overwhelmed than you already are with the ever-growing pile of laundry that happens with kids in the house, right? And so really clarifying why things are important to you opens up so much more creativity for how we can get them done, right? Because the same example around the running, now 20 years later, I run, 3 to 4 times a week, and I love it. And it's one of my favorite things to do, because my why is completely different. But also, I've had a twin pregnancy that made me high risk, and I wasn't allowed to move very much. I had a pregnancy during COVID when I had 2 children there, right? If I was only stuck on, I had to run because I'm a runner, I would have not been able to do anything for multiple years, right?
Yes.
But if I'm very clear on why, right? I run because I get some me time. I run because I get just like, some time to be outside, or I get to move, and my body feels great when I do it, and my brain feels great when I do it, and all of those things. Suddenly there's so much more creativity for, okay, how else is that possible? Right. And so I think especially around housework, we have this idea of like, okay, Saturday mornings, I'm going to deep clean for 4 hours, ignoring the fact that you have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old who are probably going to follow you around and eat snacks everywhere that you're cleaning, and just make a bigger mess in the process. Right. And so, okay, if we stay stuck with exactly that picture, you probably will stay stuck in overwhelm without ever making, a dent in the housework you have. But when we say like, why is it important to me, right? Why is it important to me to not have toothpaste in my like bathroom sink that my kids spit out and then forgot? Because honestly, it feels kind of gross to me, and I don't enjoy going into that kind of space. So that means that instead of focusing on, I can clean my entire house, I can be like, when I'm going to the bathroom anyway, I can keep Lysol wipes there, and I can wipe out the sink, right? So being able to then clarify the why certain things are important to you allows for so much more creativity to then get them done.
Absolutely. And when I don't know, you probably have all your different ways how you help moms, and we're going to leave all your details down in the description box, underneath the video, of how they can work with you, because I think you're a godsend for any mom who is in maybe the beginning stages, or just hears that, maybe types burnout into Google and sees what comes up, And And what I always found, and you might do that as well, is when you ask this why question, to maybe start just writing a list. I always just start writing a list why that is important, the why, or I was always ask what's the intention behind it. And would you find as well for me, and I only made another list for one of my posts that is going to come up, and I called it the mother guilt list. I wrote this list last week, and I always writing what I should be doing, So what I always find is that a lot of it has to do, and the why for me is behind how others see me. So, it's so what.
And I think it's so interesting because I think you just summarized it perfectly, right? Because it's the same thing as, I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but when you get dressed to go to an event or to go out or to go somewhere, and you're like, I am feeling myself. Like I look good, right?
Yeah.
And then you catch a reflection of yourself in the mirror and you're like, oh, I don't like it from that angle. Ooh, right? And suddenly you were feeling good 5 seconds ago, but now you're like, I don't know if I feel good anymore, right? And often that's because suddenly you've seen what other people are going to see when they see you, right? And so your own opinion of, I look good and like I feel good, and this color, like I'm just rocking life today, right? Suddenly changes when you have somebody's perception of you. And so often, I know that we're jumping around the P's here, but one of the P's that really leads to the overwhelm, the overstretch, the hustle for women is people pleasing, right?
Absolutely.
And people pleasing really is mimicking or creating our entire life based on what other people are going to experience of us, not how we want to experience our life, right? I want my house to be clean. And we keep on, using housework as an example, but that could be anything. I want to get a promotion, right? I want to start a business. I want to run a 5K, whatever that thing is, so that when people see me, they think this. So that when people see my home, they think this, right? Versus, why do I want to do it for me? And so starting to really unpack some of those whys, and don't get me wrong, if you want to be like, I want to have a clean house so that when people walk in and I invite them for dinner, they're not like, no, thank you, I would not like to eat here. I hear that, right? Like I totally hear that.
Yeah.
But it's starting to notice some of those people pleasing tendencies where we're really not building the life that we want to live. We're working towards building the life that we want people to think that we live. Right? And those are two very different things.
Absolutely. And I wanted to share something because I'm someone who processes things very deeply. So when you were talking to Renee, I don't know if you remember, you had brought this analogy of Mr. Bean, who people here in Europe, I'm based in Ireland, are familiar with.
One of my best friends growing up was, her parents moved from England.
Yes.
So I am well versed in Mr. Bean.
Brilliant. So you had this, and I'm going to also link your chat with Renee below, how it's about getting from A to B, and then what happened to me an hour later, I arrive on this island. I'm familiar with that place, by the way.
Yeah.
And so where that house is and where we stay overnight, you then can go up to the top of the hill. It takes about 15 minutes to get to the top. And I had your words in my ear, about getting from A to B and not really noticing how you got there. And the way you take it, you live your life through your lens. I look through the parenting lens. So I was walking, I tried to get up to that hill as fast as possible. And I was thinking, the whole time, there was high grass, not many people had walked there yet at the start of the weekend. And I was just looking down all the time, not to get nettled, in my legs and all that. Yeah. And then I stopped maybe 1/3 or 1/3 of the way. And I looked up to the top, and I had this epiphany in that moment, because of what you were saying. Yeah. It's not about, and I wrote it down, you said something like perfectionism is to stay stuck and looking at the end result. So I was just stopping for a moment with your words in my ear, and I was enjoying the view from not the top of the mountain, but from the
Yeah.
level I was at. And that's why I resonated with you as well in that podcast, because we're missing out, or we can miss out so much as mothers, right? From wanting to just get to the age of 18 of our children as
Yeah.
soon as possible, and then missing those years that are so joyful.
It's so true because we hold, and it feels so real in the moment, right? And I think it's how diet culture and hustle culture really mimic each other so well,
Yeah.
because so much of what we tell ourselves is, I just have to get to
Mhm.
my kids being potty trained, or them sleeping through the night, or them being able to go to to walk themselves to school, or getting the next promotion, or buying my house, or whatever those things are.
Yeah.
And then I'll be able to
Yeah.
be happy, feel proud of myself, feel
Yeah.
good, feel fulfilled, all of those things, right? It's like a Mad Libs for our lives. But suddenly, and what so many of my clients find is, like, you've done all of the things,
Yes.
and happiness you thought you were going to find, like, there's only more hustle on the other side of it,
Yes.
right? Suddenly it's not when they, are out of diapers. Suddenly it's when they're sleeping through the night. And suddenly it's when they start first grade. And suddenly it's when, they're 15 years old. And suddenly it's when they get married and move out of the house, right? It's
Yeah.
all of those things. And before you know it, you're 80 years old, and you haven't really lived the life that you want to have.
Mhm.
And I understand why it happens, especially for people who are moms,
Mhm.
right? And I think that sometimes we forget the fact that our lives didn't end when we had kids,
Yes.
right? Like, our job now isn't to only give our kids 18 years before then they have to give up the rest of their lives for, for whatever kids they have eventually. But that's really what we end up showing them when we don't take ownership over living the life that we want.
Absolutely. And you probably have a daughter. Do you have one daughter of your
I
three
do.
children? Yeah. So it's this other thing, and you mentioned this, and I really took a deep dive this month into that, of the mother-daughter relationship, and how our generation here is. I think we're really being invited to break patterns, and we're given a chance because of all the privileges we have, I think, to
Yeah.
maybe look at our behavior. And so what you had shared was something like and I was thinking the same thing. My daughter had shared, I made a mistake a few weeks before. There was a misunderstanding with collecting a friend's daughter from school, and I made a mistake. And I was sitting there in the car. I don't know if you or the viewer can relate to this. And I said, I can't believe I messed this up because I read the text message wrong,
Yeah.
And uh, and my daughter said, and she's so smart, she says, you tell us we shouldn't feel bad when we make mistakes, but look at yourself when you make one,
Oh, isn't that the worst when they call you out and you're like, damn it. Damn it. Why did I teach you these things in the first place? This
Yeah,
is for me. This is for you. But
yeah,
yes, 100%, right?
yeah.
And it's so true, because I am such a perfectionist. Like, I grew up being such a perfectionist, so I don't teach anything that I haven't had to overcome by myself.
Yeah.
And my daughter definitely has perfectionist tendencies, right? And the number of times that I have to purposely, my husband and I, like, I forget what it was a couple of weeks ago, where I made something, and it was something like for dinner, and it just was not good, right? I tried a new recipe, it was not good. And we were eating dinner, like, my husband and I were eating dinner, and we literally, my husband was like, you made something and you tried it the first time and it wasn't good. And I was like, yes, that is what we were, like, putting on a skit, basically. Like, I was like, that
Yeah.
is what happened, right? And he was like, and you are okay, and nothing happened. And because it's true, we
Yeah.
sometimes rely so much
Yeah.
on the things that we say to our kids, and we forget the fact that they see everything else, right? My kids are so much smarter than even, like, I give them credit for. Like, they see everything. And so we forget the fact that no matter how much we tell our kids, especially, our daughters, that they're like sparkly unicorn perfection, and like perfection in a little body who is worthy of everything in life, if they see us killing ourselves,
Yeah.
right, and sacrificing, and not treating ourselves with respect, and talking down to our bodies and all of those things, it doesn't really matter what we say to them, because they've
Oh,
seen the
yeah.
complete opposite. Right?
Absolutely.
And so I think that the reason that a lot of my clients are moms is because it's one of the first times that it really smacks you in the face, right? You hear yourself talking and you're looking at like a baby in front of you and you're like, oh no, this is what I'm teaching this child, right? Or
Mhm.
you talk to them, like when they are older and they can say something to you like, don't you always say to us that? And you're like, oh yes, I do actually say the complete opposite of what I'm doing right now. And that's, a great motivation for change.
That's it. And we always talk in my parenting approach, we talk about having the courage to be imperfect. It takes a
Yeah,
bit of courage, doesn't it? So
it really does.
what is your advice, to moms to not even get to this awful state? And I don't know how bad it was for you, but I was in burnout, and there were days where I just literally, there was one day where I made a decision whether I'll stay or whether I go. And it is one of the worst things that can happen to us, I think.
Yeah.
What do you recommend? Maybe one thing, and I'm sure you have loads of things, for moms, to be more gentle with themselves and to role model something that they really want for their daughters and sons.
Yeah, so it comes down to first like clarifying what your values are, right?
Mhm.
Clarifying what your whys are, because we've heard the analogy for years of learning how to understand which balls that we're juggling are glass and which ones are plastic, right? Which ones you can drop and which ones we have to be more careful with. And I actually talk to my clients about, there being atomic bomb balls, like
Mhm.
those you most definitely, cannot drop. Like those ones, life and death, keep your
Mhm.
kids safe, all the things.
Mhm.
There's glass, like it's a pretty big deal if you drop them. Like you should really be, pretty on top of like registering your kids for school. You should probably do that, right?
Mhm.
And then there's plastic balls. But not only that, there's balls that we should never be juggling to begin with, right? It's not only balls that we shouldn't feel bad if we drop them, it's we should actually drop them on purpose because they don't serve our life, they don't fit into it.
Oh, I
But
love
so
that.
many of us
Yeah.
stay stuck feeling like everything is an atomic bomb, right? If
Mhm.
you send your kid to school with a cream cheese sandwich instead of a beautiful bento box style lunch or a warm lunch, that you're judging yourself as though it's an atomic bomb, right? Like you forgot to, I don't know, take your child to like the hospital when they had an 105 fever. Those are not the equivalent thing, right? And so a big part of the work is starting to clarify like what are your core atomic bomb things? Like you are not going one way or another. You are not going to drop those.
Yeah.
And then once you clarify those, then, we do the work, whether it's with me or whether it's on your own, to start building the confidence to drop the balls that you don't have to be holding
Yeah.
and to even find alternatives for parents as to how to navigate those atomic bombs, right? An
Mhm.
example that I give is like the like atomic bomb thing, like this has to happen is my kids get picked up from school,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Mhm.
Do you hear the difference between my kids get picked up from school versus I have to pick my kids up from school,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
my kids getting home from school means that in an ideal world, I am the person who does it. 99% of the time, that's true. But also, if push comes to shove, I can ask a friend to drive them home. I can ask my mother to drive them home. I can figure out a way to have them stay in aftercare so that I can get there if there's something that, has to happen that I can't get there,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Not
perfect.
every single ball needs to be one that we juggle, and
Mm.
not every single one has to be juggled in the way that we've been doing it until now,
Right.
right? And that's really where, again, when we have those whys, we can connect back to, is there any other option here,
Mhm.
right? Like, how else can we do this that doesn't feel like it has to be this rigid way that we've done it until now, and we put the pressure on ourselves to do it?
And there's also what I'm reminded of is that we think everything is our responsibility because we're the mother.
Yeah,
And that is so in the process of being changed right now.
yeah.
I love that. That is a really good example, you know, to delegate. I don't think that's the right word in
Yeah.
motherhood, but maybe we come
But
up
like it
with
doesn't only
one.
have to be delegation, right? It can also
Ah,
be something as simple as, I want to have dinner, like I need to feed my kids dinner every night.
Yeah.
right, is very
Yeah.
different than setting the expectation of, I have to make a gourmet 3-course meal for them, right? Feeding
Exactly.
them dinner every night means I can order takeout
Yeah.
and still achieve that same goal, right? And so it's really clarifying, like, what is the like, what are those things that we need to be able to do?
Yeah.
And we don't have to exactly do them. Like feeding your kids cereal still counts as dinner. Still
Mm.
a licensed dietitian. You can still take my word for it. Like like ordering takeout still
Yeah.
counts. If you feed your kid ice cream for dinner, you've still fed them dinner, right? And
Totally.
so it's
Yeah.
starting to clarify, like, what is the real atomic bomb that we don't have, that we want to make sure that we don't drop? And then
Mm-hmm.
how else can we do that thing
Yeah.
so that it doesn't have to feel like as much pressure on us?
Absolutely. And in preparation for our chat, I was thinking of something that I heard earlier this month, which was that we tend to, as a parent, this is one of the biggest kind of mistaken beliefs, I think, that we project into the future what could happen. And then right now we parent from a point of it has already happened. So
Yeah.
why do you think that is, that we make everything that, how do you call it, atomic ball? And
Yeah.
why don't we learn that some of them are glass and plastic?
So I think that it's a very interesting question. I was just talking to a client about this
Mm.
yesterday, and I actually heard this analogy years ago when I was taking
Mhm.
a picky eating course. And it was, I think it was Melanie Cormick. She's a dietitian who talks
Mhm.
about picky eating, but she's talking about nerves, right? Being
Mhm.
anxious about something.
Yeah.
And the example she gave was stepping out of your house and
Mhm.
there being a bear there, right? So normally what you probably do is turn around, like run into your house, slam the door, bolt it, like all the things,
Mhm.
right? And you'd get into your house and you'd go, okay, I'm safe, right? And your brain learns we did just enough to keep us safe.
Okay.
Or you try and walk to your car anyway, the bear bites you, and your nervous system learns, okay, we didn't do enough, we got hurt, right? There often isn't an answer for or an option for, you know what, we probably did too much. We should do less next time, right?
Okay.
When you get back into the house, you don't learn that running at the house and closing the door and locking it and putting on the alarm and putting a chair up against the door and was actually too much. You probably could have just closed the door and locked it,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Right.
And
Right.
so often we learn by what we've done in the past instead of really thinking about what's necessary in the moment, number
Okay.
one. And
Mhm.
number two, women often don't have the skill, are never taught the skill to have their own back through failure,
Oh, I loved when you
right?
said that. Yeah.
And so we're not going to risk the failure of, you know what, last time I did 70%, right?
Mhm.
Maybe this time I can try and do 60 and
Mhm.
see if I can still do it, right? Because what if we fail? What if we don't? What if then our kid, like, doesn't like the dinner that we made for them? Or what if we try that at work and, all hell breaks loose and we just like it's just terrible. And I had a client that I was working with through this actually, because she was she was giving a presentation to the CEO of her company. And she was like, I know that I'm not going to have 100 hours to practice this, right? Last time I did 100 hours, but this time I'm not going to be able to do that. And we really had to both coach through and then practically, think about how do we actually utilize that time that we have, knowing that you're going to do less,
Yeah.
but also get our nervous systems on board, right? To be able to know, okay, it can be safe to try it out, right? And if all hell breaks loose, we can
Yeah.
also have our own backs through that. And
Oh,
so instead of just maintaining the status quo, the work really is learning to have your own back through what might happen, right? And I think that's the difference between anxious planning
mhm.
and planning, right? Is
Okay.
that anxiety planning of like, this might be a mess. And so I'm going to go above and beyond and try and protect it just in case this might happen,
Mhm.
versus being able to be very, very conscious of there are lots of possibilities, right? It's like going in with a birth plan, right?
Mhm.
You can know, but you can know what you want, but you
Yeah.
also at the same time are wildly aware of the
Yeah.
fact that you have like there are things that are outside of your control. You
Mhm.
can try and control what you can control, and ultimately you're having a baby who's going to do their things their way, right? And
Yeah.
so we need to start planning more things like that, where there's a difference between being the kind of planning where we're like, I need to stay hyper vigilant all the time,
Yeah.
versus being aware of what might happen and how you're going to have your own back through that process.
Yeah, I love that. And, I started with my 10-year-old son. We did some decluttering this morning, emptied the stuff from his room. He's really interested in interior design. So he designed his room and we just gave it a go, And halfway through the day, he fell ill and he needed to sleep. This is a child who never sleeps, And I was thinking exactly that, the expectation to get this whole room done in a day with a child, it's outrageous. So it's almost like another way of seeing, oh, there's actually some rest in here for me this afternoon as a mother as well. So it's always this, how, I don't know that saying, but plan for it, but then expect everything else to happen or something, right?
Totally.
And you mentioned a few things. I want to end with this question, having this nutrition background as well. There was something, I can't remember but I heard you say something like that. And I thought, oh, what a relief, So it comes from what we feed our children sometimes, and that it's okay. Like you said, we feed them ice cream, to just get through the day. And, or even for us, when we know we shouldn't have the sugar, we shouldn't eat the chocolate. But isn't it such a different approach when we give ourselves permission to maybe have the chocolate rather than you must not have sugar again for dinner,
Exactly.
So I'd love if you finished by sharing a bit from your research on that, from why it is okay to have some chocolate sometimes, not have
there's so many reasons why it's okay to have chocolate sometimes. And that comes from, I think that we forget what, again, like the why we're doing it, right? For sure. I think that there are times, there's times where I would tell clients to stop eating the chocolate, and there's times that I tell them to start eating the chocolate, right? When clients are only coming to me with, every time I'm sad, I eat chocolate. Every time I'm happy, I eat chocolate. Every time I need a break or I need to de-stress or okay, that's a time where I'm going to say to you, you probably don't have enough tools in your tool belt to handle stress in other ways. Eat the chocolate and let's find other ways so it's not the chocolate every single time, right? But food is like pleasure, right? Food is joy. Food is connection, especially eating the chocolate or giving yourself a break or whatever that means to you, right? Whether it's you're like, I shouldn't take a nap in the middle of the day. I shouldn't go to bed early. I shouldn't eat the chocolate. I shouldn't have a glass of wine. I shouldn't be going out with friends now. I should be going to bed early so that I can get up with my kids, right? Understanding why you're doing it, again, can be so helpful in getting rid of all of those shoulds.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't know, should you not eat the chocolate when you're enjoying, a bar of chocolate with your kids or going out for ice cream with your kids and you're now connecting with them and everyone's sitting and laughing around the table? Because that seems to me like something you might want to do, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that we have all of these arbitrary shoulds in our minds. Someone's given them to us at some point and we're holding these shoulds, right? I should exercise. I should go to sleep early. I should build a business. I should have a job. I should have a higher paying job. I should get a promotion. I should want to climb the corporate ladder, right? And we've never actually connected back to should you. Like, should someone? Maybe, but should you? Maybe or maybe not.
Yeah, I love that. And definitely taking that 3-letter word away with me, the why, without, I love that. So, how can people contact you? And I know there's a time difference. I probably have a lot more viewers in Europe, but you can accommodate that. What's the best way to connect with you?
The best way to connect with me is typically on Instagram. I hang out lots there. My handle is Ahuva Hershkop. Or you can definitely find me on Facebook. I run a free community called Beyond Burnout with Ahuva Hershkop.
Brilliant. Great. I'll put all those links below. And I want to just thank you so much for having that conversation. I learned so much from you. Thank you.